Okay, so let's talk about the latest House Republican shenanigans with when they were passing a defense bill. Apparently, they had to add limiting abortion access and halting diversity because that has something to do with defense. I don't know. But anyway, let's get to the article. The House passed a sweeping defense bill Friday that provides an expected 5.2% pay raise for service members, which is good, but strays from traditional military policy with Republican add-ons blocking abortion coverage, diversity initiatives at the Pentagon, and transgender care that deeply divided the chamber. I'm sure it was pretty much along party lines. Democrats voted against the package, which had sailed out of the House Armed Services Committee on an almost unanimous vote weeks ago before being loaded with the GOP priorities during a heated late night floor debate this week. I was almost going to ask if there was any Democrats on that committee, but finding out that the shenanigans started after it passed, okay, that makes sense. The final vote was 219 to 210. Whoa, that's close. With 4 Democrats siding with the GOP. What? And 4 Republicans opposed. Oh, I would love to know who were the 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. I really would like to know. The bill, as written, is expected to go nowhere in the Democratic majority Senate. Well, that's not a shock. But yeah, I really hope they actually mention who were the 4 Democrats who agreed to the bill and the Republicans that opposed the bill, because that could be interesting, especially on the Republican side, if these people are um, either up for re-election or just basically, are they in any danger of being primaried? Because I'm sure that this will be used against them. And which one were the Democrats? Because what the hell? I mean, depending on their their overall record, I wouldn't primary them just for this. But this isn't a good look. So, are these Democrats in purple states, or are they, Democrats in name only, like Kirsten Sinema was? So, yeah. Yeah, I'd love to know who was who. So, efforts to halt the U.S. funding for Ukraine in its war against Russia were turned back, but Republicans added provisions to stem the Defense Department's diversity initiatives and to restrict access to abortions. Again, what does that have to do with defense? But I am glad that the funding is continuing for Ukraine because, I don't think that Putin is going to hold with Ukraine. I mean, hell, he attacked. People don't even know that he is in control of parts of Georgia. So, and the only reason he can't go further is because Georgia's kind of not letting him. so, so yeah, stop this madness before it gets completely out of control. Efforts to halt the U.S. Okay, I read that already. The abortion issue has been championed by Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican from Alabama. Please, God, get rid of him. Who is singularly stalling Senate confirmation of military officers, and that's why one of the reasons I want them to get rid of him, including the new Commandant of the Marine Corps. Simply because abortion exists. It's like, what is wrong with you? Okay, you know what? You don't like abortion? Great, don't get one. Actually, it makes me question whether Tommy's ever seen a vagina. He's one of those who I really got to find out, does he have kids? Because he certainly doesn't act like a man who's ever seen a woman naked. Well, in well, intentionally on the woman's part anyway. We are continuing to block the Biden administration's woke agenda, said Representative Lauren Boebert, Republican, Colorado. I hope somebody had asked her after she said that nonsense, what is woke? Because for the most part, when you ask these people, what does woke mean? They cannot tell you. Because to them, that's just a bad word. They have no clue what the word actually means. Or if they do and they tell you, they just out themselves as horrible, horrible people. So, either way, being anti woke is sort of like being pro fascist. It's not ending well for you. All right. Turning the must pass defense bill into a partisan battleground shows how deeply the nation's military has been unexpectedly swept in disputes over race, equity, and women's health care that's now driving the Republican Party's priorities in America's widening national divide. Because it's true. These people no longer have policies on anything else. They just rant about these issues and they just keep pounding it and pounding and pounding it. They don't actually, oh yeah, and tax cuts for the rich. Those are their only policies. They can't give you any nuanced policy positions on anything else. During one particularly tense moment in the debate, Democratic Representative Joyce Beatty of Ohio, a former chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, spoke of how difficult it was to look across the aisle as Republicans chip away at gains for women, black people, and others in the military. You are setting us back, she said, about an amendment from Representative Eli Crane, a Republican from Arizona, that would prevent the Defense Department from requiring participation in race-based training for hiring, promotions, or retention. Just think about that for a moment. They would block that. In an era where the Defense Department the military is having such a hard time gaining recruits, this schmuck is going to make that harder. I just do not understand this. And believe me, this piece of work gets so much better. Crane argued that Russia and China do not mandate diversity measures in their military operations, and neither should the United States. Has he seen the populations of China and Russia or how they treat minorities, for that matter? My guess is he saw how they treat minorities and said, yeah, let's do that. Instead of, treating them like equal citizens, let's treat them like the Uyghurs in China or the Chechens. Well, the Chechens that aren't falling at the feet of Putin. Anyway, so we don't want our military to be a social experiment, he said. We want the best of the best. I'm sorry. You do know that the military has been integrated since the 60s? I mean, granted, there were plenty of racists and, blacks had their own platoon because, couldn't possibly have black and white people actually commingling or anything. Whoever heard of such a thing? But at the same time, we know they get along because, for the most part, all they care about is, does this person have my back? They do not give a flying fuck what their skin color is, what their sexual orientation is, or if they happen to be trans or not. They don't care. As long as they get home alive, they do not care. And just think about it. We want the best of the best. Just think of that for a moment. He is literally saying that the only people who could possibly properly defend this country are white. He's literally a white nationalist. He is literally saying that white people are the best people. Yeah, there are some white people that are the best in certain fields, but it's not because they're white. Oh my God. And trust me, it gets even better. When Crane used the pejorative phrase colored people, like I said, for black military personnel, Beatty asked for his words to be stricken from the record. Yeah, because, his previous statement about us, we don't want to be a social experiment, but we want the best of the best, that wasn't racist enough. He had to use colored people. How is... Maybe he thinks that colored people and people of color are the same thing? Okay. There are a lot of terms that, in theory, are not problematic. But once racists start using them, it kind of becomes problematic. Like, in theory, blackface should not be controversial, depending on the context. However, thanks to things like Amos and Andy, well, racism uses it and to mock people. So, yeah, that became a bad thing. Probably calling black people the N-word. If racists just kept their grimy hands off of it, it probably wouldn't have the connotation it has now. Or even Negro, which is a shame on that one because, well, that's just Spanish for black. So now we have dipshits who want to cancel an entire language just because they have a word for black which is now considered remotely offensive. And I say remotely because it's not exactly like the English word. So, anyway, Friday's vote capped a tumultuous week for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. We need editors. A Republican from California, as conservatives essentially drove the agenda, forcing their colleagues to consider their ideas for the annual bill that has been approved by Congress unfailingly since World War II. Now, I have mixed emotions about this bill because a lot of people, myself included, are driven nuts. We spend more on the military than the next 10 nations combined. I think it's 10, might be more. And yet this is the same country that whines that there isn't enough money to be spent on this, that, and the other thing, but they're willing to throw money at the military. So, on the one hand, is this really a bad thing? Because do we really need to be spending more on the military? But on the other hand, I certainly don't want to be caught flat-footed because the U.S. is trying really, really hard to make everyone hate us. So, I think he's doing great because we are moving through. It was like over 1,500 amendments, and we're moving through them, said Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, representative of Georgia. I'm gonna throw up. She told reporters she changed her mind to support the bill after McCarthy offered her a seat on the committee that will be negotiating the final version with the Senate. Well, isn't that a surprise? We have to swing a carrot in front of the beast to get them to do what we want. I I do not know what she thinks she's going to accomplish by negotiating with the Senate. She is completely out of her mind. Democrats, in a joint leadership statement, said they were voting against the bill because Republicans turned what should be a meaningful investment in our men and women in uniform into extreme and reckless legislative joyride. Now, they were going to be given a pay raise, so that I'm in total agreement with. But I highly doubt that's the only thing this bill does. But I could be completely wrong. Extreme MAGA Republicans have chosen to hijack the historically bipartisan National Defense Authorization Act to continue attacking reproductive freedom and jamming their right-wing ideology down the throats of the American people, said the statement from Representatives Hakeem Jeffries of New York, Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, and Pete Aguilar of California. It's so funny that these MAGA Republicans are the same people who are whining that gay people exist, or actually the entire LGBTQ plus community, are jamming their existence down people's throats, and here they are doing this shit. What do you call this? The defense bill authorizes $874.2 billion in the coming year for the defense spending, keeping with President Joe Biden's budget request. The funding itself is to be allocated later when Congress handles the appropriation bills, as is the normal process. The package sets policy across the Defense Department, as well as in aspects of the Energy Department, and this year focuses particularly on the U.S. stance toward China, Russia, and other national security fronts. Republican opposition to U.S. support for the war in Ukraine drew a number of amendments, including one to block the use of cluster munitions that Biden just sent to help Ukraine battle Russia. I actually don't mind that one. What the hell? Cluster munitions? Yeah. Once I heard that it's, so volatile, and the chances of it killing civilians are so high. Yeah, can't we send them, basically anything else? It was a controversial move because weapons which can leave behind unexploded munitions endangering civilians are banned by many other countries. Well, the U.S. is really, really good about not giving a shit what's banned in other countries and continuing to do their own thing. I really don't hate the U.S. I know it sounds like it in this video, but I don't. But it's just so depressing. Most of those efforts to stop U.S. support for Ukraine failed. Now, the one amendment about the munitions, about the cluster munitions, that I agree with. But send something else instead. Not drop the whole support of the war. Proposals to roll back the Pentagon's diversity and inclusion measures and block some medical care for transgender personnel were approved. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. GOP Representative Ronnie Jackson of Texas, who served as a White House physician, who is, I believe he was referred to as the Candyman. So that should tell you all you need to know about him. pushed forward the abortion measure that would prohibit the defense secretary from paying for or reimbursing expenses relating to abortion services. Jackson and other Republicans praised Tuberville for his stand against the Pentagon's abortion policy, which was thrust into prominence as states started banning the procedure after the Supreme Court decision last summer overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade law. Now he's got support. He's got backup here in the House, Jackson said. Now, for those who are unaware, Tommy Tuberville is being a Class A dick and holding up all these personnel appointments, military personnel appointments, because the Defense Department crafted a memo that said that if you live in an area where abortion is banned and you need to get an abortion, we will pay for you to, we will make sure that you can get across state lines and have an abortion. So, pretty innocuous. They're just basically saying that if you're in dire straits, we will help you. What the government is supposed to be doing? But it's not at all certain that the House position will stand as the legislation moves to the Senate. Well, I think we could say no, which is preparing its own version of the bill. And I'm sure it has none of that culture war bullshit. Senate Democrats have the majority, but will need to work with Republicans on a bipartisan measure to ensure enough support for passage in their chamber. And granted, there are plenty of senators which are just as crazy as the Republicans in the House, but as odious as people like Mitch McConnell are, they're also not quite batshit insane. So he might, be reasonable. So McCarthy lauded the House for gutting radical programs that he said distract from the military's purpose. What is radical about going into, trying to recruit people who want to join the military, who happen to not be white? How is that radical? How is it radical to tell women who are probably spouses or some significant other of military personnel who are forced to live in a state because that's where the military personnel is stationed, that, oh well, sucks to be you, we can't do anything. Wouldn't you rather have the government say, you're there in a state that has these laws out of no fault of your own. You did not choose to live here, so we are going to help you cross state lines. What is radical about that? The only thing radical is that you are trying to treat women and non-whites as subhuman. That is the radical thing. All right. Democratic members of the House Armed Services Committee, led by Representative Adam Smith of Washington State, dropped their support due to the social policy amendments. I kind of figured that's what did it. Smith, who is white, tried to explain to Crane and other colleagues why the Pentagon's diversity initiatives were important in America, drawing on his own experience as a businessman, trying to reach outside his own circle of contacts to be able to hire and gain deeper understanding of other people. And I would just hasten to add that, there's a recruiting shortage, so why shrink the pool even more than it already is? Smith lamented that the bill that the committee passed overwhelmingly no longer exists. What was once an example of compromise and functioning government has become an ode to bigotry and ignorance. So that's where the article ends. And I really don't have anything else to say. I just wish they had said who were the four Democrats who jumped ship and thought that this was a good idea, or the four Republicans who probably just torpedoed their careers simply because they voted against Republican majority. I'm gonna have to look that up after the fact. I'm really curious if there's anyone that is particularly juicy. But for now, I will end the video there, and I will see you guys next time.